Welcome to Poland Daily History with me, Nicholas Richardson. In the previous episode, we discussed the experiences of the Primate of Poland with Nazi Germany and the Soviet Communists. In this episode, we will look at why some critics oppose the Church's decision to start his beatification process in 1992, and Pope Francis's confirmation of Hlond as venerable in 2018.
There was also a controversy related to his opinions and views on the Jewish minority in Poland before the war. The American Jewish Congress also issued a letter to the Vatican protesting against this process of making him venerable. He had written a few statements in which he, in a fashion that was quite typical for the Catholic Church before the war. This wasn't the ecumenical church that we know from after the Second Vatican Council.
Yes.
So they had more harsh words to say about their older brothers in faith, so to say. And he was very vehemently describing how the Jews should accept Jesus Christ as their Messiah, Lord and Savior, and that until then their coexistence in Poland with the Poles was a problematic phenomenon. So
I think it's part of the problem is that a lot of these intelligent people advance arguments which are quite intellectual. And of course, it's very easy for people who are not prepared to sit through and listen to the argument to just pick a few snippets and immediately accuse them of all sorts of things. I mean, we saw that with Pope Benedict when he went to Germany and picked out one of the statements that somebody had said about Muslims in the Middle Ages. And of course, they picked this out and pilloried him for it without actually picking out the full quotation that he'd actually said.
And they didn't put any light on the fact that he was quoting somebody else.
Exactly. And then went on to discuss this. But that is always, I mean, because this is very dangerous now because we live in an age of this grievance culture. And people take offence on behalf of others on the flimsiest of pretexts.
Absolutely, and in the defence of Cardinal Hlond, he also issued many letters and statements in which he wrote that despite our theological differences, the Jews are our fellow brothers, and he absolutely condemned any physical attacks on them or violent attacks on their businesses, and that during the war he was also working very strongly for the church to help the Jews that naturally were being exterminated by the German Nazis, with the epicenter of that entire Holocaust taking place in occupied Poland.
Exactly, and I think it's very... People seem to forget that Poland, during the war particularly, was not a country where the Polish administration, as such, was able to influence anything. You had the Russians on the one side, the Germans on the other, to and fro, murdering at will. And then to say 50, 60, 70 years later, oh, well, Poland did this or Poland did that, is very... reveals a complete lack of understanding of the history.
We had a very recent example by this article in the New York Post, written by Masha Gessen, a famous...
the New Yorker, I think, yes.
The New Yorker, absolutely. In which she, having become famous as an anti-Putin critic, being of Russian Jewish background, stated that the Poles are trying to diffuse their guilt for the murder on 3 million Jews, of their Jewish citizens during the war. And unfortunately, she made the same mistake. She stated that their guilt as a nation or a state. And as you mentioned, there was no state, which is the primary the primary argument. But the second is also that in other places where there was no official state, there was still what to call it, a majority movement, so to say, some kind of collaborationist groups.
Prime example, of course, is Vichy France.
Vichy France.
Who were very happy, the authorities there are very happy to help the Germans load unfortunate people onto trains to get concentration camps.
Absolutely, and today is often the French representatives that are the loudest in criticizing Poland for apparently dealing in Holocaust revisionism by simply stating that our state and a nation cannot be claimed to have been co-responsible for the Holocaust. Other examples, of course, in the vicinity of Poland are plenty. There was collaborationism going on, and Jews being sent out with the help of state powers, whether it was in Romania, in Hungary, in Lithuania. These weren't state, but as I mentioned previously, there was some kind of majority collaborationist movement. In Ukraine, of course, it was the Bandera movement. In Latvia, you had similar movements that were all very involved in the Holocaust, while the Poles are somehow easily put in the same basket. But when you look at the facts, I'm not saying that there weren't individuals that did collaborate in Poland, but the Polish underground state, the Poles never capitulated to the Germans. They never signed any peace treaty or entered into any form of collaboration. Instead, they created this underground state where the representatives of the Polish government in exile in London did pass on death sentences on people who either informed on their Jewish neighbors to the Germans or somehow themselves engaged in persecutions of Jews. So the examples are simply not comparable. And unfortunately, in the West, these fine details are often overlooked or even intentionally disregarded.
Well, indeed, people want to deflect attention from their own failures. I mean, we see it in the modern world all the time with politicians, unfortunately. Anyway, that's been fascinating. I fear we have to end it there, but that's been a marvellous story about Cardinal Hlond. There we are, another marvellous figure from Polish history, the sort of people we like to talk about on Poland Daily History. Thank you for watching, and do join us again next time on Poland Daily History.